going to start this week's Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast episode by sharing something with you that will probably surprise you. And what I'm referring to is that your nervous system is the electrical system of your soul. And basically, when your nervous system is overwhelmed by chronic stress that is caused and perpetrated by patterns of generational trauma, like being raised by a father who is abusive or being abandoned by your father completely. What this does is that it literally blocks your intuition, your state of consciousness of peace, and especially your connection to God, which leads to a lot of physical, mental, and spiritual disease. And so today I'm going to show you exactly why this happens, how it affects your relationships, your choices, all aspects of your health, and what it actually takes to disrupt the pattern and to heal this, especially when we're talking about the father line. Welcome, everyone. I'm Veronica Barragan, trauma-informed Kundalini Yoga therapist, and in this series of the systems of the body and generational healing, we've been walking through the different systems like the musculoskeletal system, the circulatory system, respiratory system. Last week, we looked at the immune system. And this is the week where we finally address the most important aspect of the generational healing journey, the system known as the nervous system, which is your command center. The nervous system, biologically, spiritually, ancestrally, through the lens of Kundalini Yoga therapy and A Course in Miracles, becomes the pathway to not just disrupt patterns of generational trauma and heal yourself and seven generations before and after you, but to literally heal the world. So, today in this episode, we're covering what the nervous system actually is from a scientific, energetic, and spiritual perspective in a way that even a 10-year-old can understand it. We're also going to look at how patterns of generational trauma rewires the nervous system, how generational trauma is passed down through the father line. And we're also going to look at the esoteric role of the spine, the breath, the chakras, and even the Holy Spirit as it relates to the nervous system and generational healing. We're going to look at the difference between pressure and prana and look at what most people don't even understand that they're struggling with, which is what is known as cold depression. And every woman needs to know about this right now because it has to do with an overwhelmed nervous system. We're also going to look at the mastery of love as the entire path out of fear and regulating our nervous system, remembering what Christ really came here to teach and not what religion has tried to hide. We're going to be looking at some techniques, Kundalini Yoga techniques, a mantra that resets the entire nervous system in the brain. And I'm even going to be sharing with you some real life examples of how all of this nervous system wiring from generational trauma shows up in your relationships, in your work, in your health, and why and how healing your nervous system actually brings you back to God, which is the whole point of your incarnation. So let's start at the root to unravel this layered, incredible journey of remembering who we are and disrupting the pattern. So, what exactly is the nervous system? So, let's first understand it scientifically, its role, what it's here for us to do, and also why it becomes hijacked through trauma. So, first and foremost, I want you to imagine your nervous system is like your body's electrical wiring. There was like this picture of somebody that used like a picture of the nervous system, and it looked like this like eyeballs with just like strings that are attached and moving through like all parts of the body, the arms, the legs, the body. It's just like all these lines. And those aspects of the nervous system are then comprised of three main parts of the nervous system. There's the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. Those are the three main parts. The brain, as we know, is like the master computer. It decides meaning, memory, emotion, perception, intuition, all these different things happen in the brain, but the brain does not create consciousness, it downloads it. And this is very important as it relates to generational trauma and the nervous system. Then the other aspect of the nervous system is also the spinal cord, which is like the main cable, where it's sending messages from the brain to the body and back. And then the nerves are all the wires branching out through your entire body. It's like your gut, your heart, the skin, the face, the hands, the lungs, everything, right? All these different wires. And it is the fastest system in your entire being, the nerves. But here's the amazing part about the nervous system that most people don't understand. First, your body actually reacts 25 seconds before your brain even understands anything. So the nervous system fires first, and then thought comes later. Isn't that crazy? What does that mean? That your thoughts are actually being driven from how your nervous system was programmed or pre-wired. And this programming happens in childhood and in the womb. And it is also inherited through epigenetics, now we know, from past ancestors. So your body's not dramatic, your nervous system is not dramatic. It's just very fast and it responds to the program than to the actual present moment awareness. So if you grew up in chaos or inconsistency, it is especially fast in reacting instead of responding because it's already been programmed. Now, there's an aspect of the nervous system that's also really important, which is the vagus nerve. And so many scientists have been studying the vagus nerve for such a long time because it literally is like responsible and a very critical part of the two of the three aspects of the nervous system. So there's the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and then there's the central nervous system, right? Your vagus nerve is 28 to 32 feet long, and it's basically specifically acting as a major communication pathway between the brain and the body's internal organs. So it controls, this vagus nerve controls involuntary functions like your heart rate, like breathing, like digestion. And it helps the body transition from a fight or flight stress response to a rest and digest state. And it does this by carrying both sensory information from the organs to the brain and also motor commands from the brain to the organs. Because we have to remember that the three aspects of the nervous system, all of it, it serves its own purpose. The parasympathetic, the sympathetic, and the central nervous system. So the vagus nerve kind of acts like as this communication device that helps all of them function and helps your entire body function. The central nervous system is your main boss system of the nervous system, and that includes the brain, the spinal cord. It decides what things mean, what you remember, how you feel, and what messages to send to the rest of your body. And then what is known as the peripheral nervous system or the parasympathetic nervous system is basically all the other nerves that branch out from your brain and spinal cord into your arms, into your legs, into your organs, into your skin, pretty much everywhere. So they act like roads and highways, carrying all these different messages out from the brain to your body and then back from the body to your brain. And then there's the autonomic nervous system. And this is the automatic pilot inside of your body. And it's a very special part of the parasympathetic nervous system that runs the stuff for you. And basically, you don't have to think about all these things that the autonomic nervous system does. So you don't have to think about your heart beating. You don't have to think about breathing. You don't even have to think about digestion. You don't have to think about sweating. All of this is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So when it comes to the vagus nerve literally becomes like the God connection cord of the body because it's responsible for so many things as it relates to the autonomic and the parasympathetic nervous system. It's controlling your heartbeat, it's controlling your gut, it's controlling your immune system, your emotional regulation, your tone of voice, even your sense of safety. So when your vagus nerve is weak, becomes weak. It loses its tone because your nervous system gets stuck in what is known as fight and flight, which is parasympathetic, which is basically like danger happening. Why? Because your brain does not know the difference between an experienced trauma and a perceived trauma. So even if it was your ancestors who experienced this trauma, which has been proven through epigenetics, or if you experience a trauma like abuse or chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, which is growing up in an abusive household, parents that were depressed, alcoholics, absent because of their own trauma, not because of who you are, then your nervous system constantly thinks it has to defend you and stays in fight and flight. And then that causes the vagus nerve to lose its tonality or its ability to do its job. So then the vagus nerve thinks it's also always trying to defend you. And then that's when other disease shows up in the physical body. So you see, it started not necessarily because of the emotion, it's because of the perception and meaning you are giving to the trauma that is then creating the set of repeated emotions that if you stay under that emotional state for long periods of time, like years, right? That's what turns into a physical disease. But you see, the emotion is not the problem. It's the perception, the meaning that you are giving to trauma that is making the vagus nerve lose its tonality, lose its ability to do its job. And then that makes you feel like everything is danger, like God is nowhere to be found, like you are alone. And why? Well, because trauma, physical, sexual, emotional, unconscious, or conscious, it changes the entire shape of your brain. The amygdala size changes, and the amygdala is like your alarm. And if it changes, it's not functioning correctly, the alarm is constantly going off in the neighborhood. Things are thieves. Yeah, and even if the experience happened 20 years ago. Then the amygdala is the almond-shaped part of your brain. Then there's the hippocampus. The hippocampus completely shrinks. So if it's shrinked in size because you went through childhood where you were raised where there was a lot of fighting, survival. That's another big one of our ancestors. Not enough food, abuse, all these different things. Your hippocampus is going to shrink. So it's not regulating emotion. So what you're constantly very confused and you might have a lot of memory issues. A lot of women, they can't remember what happened to them in their childhood, but they just know that they're very sad or depressed or angry at growing up. Well, even if you don't remember, the subconscious mind is so strong about making you forget so that it's protecting you in a way. As an adult, those things that you've tucked in the subconscious mind, they become your personality. So you really can't really get away from it. Then we have what is known as the prefrontal cortex part of the brain. Now, the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, when we've been through patterns of generational trauma, which again, 95% of the trauma you went through is generational. Somebody in your lineage went through it. There's a part of the brain that's called the prefrontal cortex that actually also shuts down. And this part of the brain is very important, not just for emotional regulation, but also for intuition. And when we don't have our intuition, the power of intuition, or we feel like we can't trust our intuition, we basically live in a state of consciousness where we're very anxious and we're also maybe even angry and have resentment because we even question unconsciously where were you, God, when I needed you? And because you're you were betrayed through the abuse, it's very difficult for you when this prefrontal cortex part of your brain shuts down to have compassion for yourself or for others. In order to have true compassion, you have to have learned how to sit with your own pain in order to be able to have true compassion for others. And this prefrontal cortex shuts down, and compassion becomes very triggering, where you instead become locked into the identity of victimhood. And believe me, what happened to you was not right, right? And we all wish it wouldn't have happened. But would you rather stay a victim or would you rather rewire your nervous system and brain to even understand that that experience of trauma is actually part of the whole. It's actually not good or bad, but that it happened because the curriculum showed up in this incarnation for you to transcend it, to master love instead of fear, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So the trauma changes the brain, which is connected to the nervous system. It changes the gut, and your gut is like another brain because it has more neurons than your spinal cord. Remember, even our digestive system, we talked a lot about this in that system in that podcast episode. If you missed it, go check it out. But it's what it's digesting is emotions. And if it can't digest emotions, then you can't digest food. So your gut is your brain. It has more neurons than your spinal cord, and it controls your mood, your intuition, your immune system as well. And this is why gut feelings are real. But if you've been through trauma, this becomes dysfunctional, which then not only can you not digest food, you're picking the wrong foods, foods that are highly processed that make you more sick. And then you definitely don't trust your intuition or your gut feelings because you betrayed yourself for so long, your inner child, where you didn't acknowledge the pain, you didn't speak up about what was going on because you couldn't. And later, as an adult, then you also don't trust yourself, you don't trust your gut instincts, you don't trust God. And when your nervous system finally learns to feel safe again, which is what we do through Kundalini Yoga therapy, we increase prana. That's when your body is given the permission to heal. So, learning, rewiring your nervous system and brain, which we're going to talk about how to do that through Kundalini Yoga therapy, is the true medicine. Because when you can feel safe in your body again, what that means is that you took your nervous system out of being stuck in fight and flight from the traumatic experience or experiences you went through to learn to re-educate it to relax. Then that is the medicine that changes your brain, changes your life, your entire life, because your nervous system even decides your relationships. It's not even your mind. Your nervous system is like a two nervous systems come into a room. The strongest one always wins, the one that's creating more energy, right? And your nervous system was pre-wired in the womb in by your mom, right? So like if your mom and dad were constantly fighting while your mom was pregnant with you or while she was raising you, those are programs that become pre-wired in the nervous system. That's what your nervous system thinks is safe. Even if it's survival abuse, that's what it's used to. So then you grow up and your nervous system is a magnet that then, even though you say out loud, I'll never, ever, ever marry someone like my dad or marry someone like my mom, you end up aligning with the same partner, exactly like your mom and dad, not because you're unlucky, but because your nervous system, that's what it feels safe around, your brain. So it keeps magnifying it to you. So if you want to change the relationships that are magnifying to you, you got to change your nervous system and your brain because spiritual experiences themselves are nervous system states. God feels close when your body is safe. You're not going to feel safe in your body if you're in a toxic relationship. And the reason the toxic relationship is because your nervous system, that's what it feels safe around. Your nervous system is literally like electric light that is like lighting up your entire soul. In ancient times, the ancient ancestors would call it Kundalini energy, right? This inner fire, this chi. The rainbow body, we've heard it called, even the Holy Spirit, Tonali, all describing the same electricity, which is your nervous system. Now, the trauma, the patterns that are passed down generationally, and even before age 7, when your brain is still developing, that's what your nervous system copies. So, your mother's stress response, your father's emotional availability or not, right? Your family's survival strategies due to not enough food, not enough money, abuse, tuck it under the rug. This is why you respond like your lineage, not from the present moment, not even from your logic. It's from a program wired into the nervous system. So, breath, for example, or chanting mantra, meditation, Kundalini yoga meditation, it becomes like a remote control for the nervous system. Long exhales, you're re-educating your nervous system into safety. Short breaths that are shallow, which is what most people are breathing like when they've been through trauma, constant danger. And that's why meditation and using your breath and mantra are so important because it's the remote control that changes the wiring. And it's not like your nervous system is supposed to stay regulated every second of the day. Look, you're a human being. One day you might have to bury your parents or one of your parents or a loved one or someone you're close to. Does that mean that just because you do this inner work of regulating your nervous system, you're not gonna move through grief? No, you're still gonna move through grief. You still might cry. You still might have sadness. Still might have rage and anger, but you do not become identified with your emotions. You know that they're a moment in time and space, not who you are. It's like what we were talking about with grief. If you missed that podcast episode, you need to listen to it. I'll link it below because it's really so important. That's one of the things that generational healing we have to work through the grief because so many of our ancestors held so much grief in their lungs and in their hearts, right? And the meridians that connect the lungs to the heart. And because of that, the remote control is lost. And so there is no safety in our bodies. And that's why we integrate these teachings to help us release, feel those emotions and not feel like we're drowning in them. And when you think about like the parents that you chose in this incarnation, and especially like the father, mother protects in the spiritual world, her presence, her prayers protect you, but the father protects in the physical realm. And if father was not there or was abusive, it's going to affect all aspects of your physical, mental, and spiritual health, but it's especially going to affect like your work, your dating, your relationships, how you parent, your boundaries. That one also is huge. Your money and your emotional capacity to be able to sustain these heavy emotions. And we're going to go deeper into this soon. But this is an overview of how important it is to understand that the nervous system is the root of changing all of these patterns. Because generational trauma is not just stories, it's biology. It's the nervous system conditioning that gets passed down. So when like your father was unpredictable, emotionally absent, explosive, inconsistent, absent. He abandoned you. He was depressed. He was overworked. He was living in survival. He shut down. Then what does your nervous system learn? Hypervigilance. When is the other shoe going to drop? The brain. Walking on eggshells. Perfectionism that equates to the fear of being seen, where you're self-sabotaging your success. That's toxic masculinity. There's also a lot of emotional self-protection where you feel you can't trust anybody in the world because no one made you feel safe, where you don't ask for help, right? Where you're needing to control it all. Toxic masculinity because you're alone. No one's going to help you. And where you possibly even shut down when you feel overwhelmed. And none of this is because you're broken. It's because your nervous system adapted to survive your parents, your dad. That's the father line. And there's no shame or guilt here. We're not even blaming. We're recognizing and acknowledging that our fathers could not make us feel safe in our bodies because no one taught them how to feel safe in theirs. And we don't want to continue the pattern, right? Which is why then we do the inner work to change the nervous system and the brain. The father line, the mother line is very impactful, obviously. And I think so many people think that they don't have to do any work around forgiving or healing their mothers or fathers. And the minute that I start to work with them, I mean, within a few hours, sometimes it's like, oh my God, I didn't know I had to release this. Why? Because your nervous system has never felt safe enough to actually heal. But with the father line and mother line, it's especially invasive because a lot of us have hear that term, blood is thicker than water, and we feel guilty for even calling our parents out for how they raised us. But we're not blaming, we're simply acknowledging. Where, especially when it comes to like the father line in relationships, you're attracting emotionally unavailable men. That's not bad luck. Or you're mistaking chaos for passion in relationships. Or you're confusing control with protection. Or you shut down when someone gets intimate and close with you. That's all related to the father line. Or you're over functioning, trying to be the strong one. And if you distrust, if you don't trust the masculine energy, if you don't trust men, your body is not choosing, it's your nervous system scanning for familiar patterns. And this shows up in our physical health too, where anxiety shows up, thyroid issues, adrenal fatigue, chronic tension and stress, migraines, IBS, which has become so common with women, depression, immune weakness, all of it correlated because the body never felt protected. And so you're probably overworking, overgiving, people pleasing, you avoid boundaries, you chase strength instead of safety, you fear authority, and you are constantly performing. It's not mindset, it's inherited nervous system programming. That's all that it is. So in Kundalini therapy, we don't just say, oh, regulate your nervous system and hope for the best. We work directly with the wiring of your nervous system. One of the things that Yogi Bhajan said, he's the tantric master who brought Kundalini yoga from the east to the west, that was very, very powerful in relation to the nervous system and to the brain, is he said that the personality of a human is controlled by the frontal lobe and the automatics are controlled by the hypothalamus. So these are parts of the brain. So for the hypothalamus, there is what is known as japa. Japa is repetition of mantra, not affirmations. That's different because that's written in an English language. But japa, mantra, Kundalini mantra, which is actually the science of sound. And it's not even a language, it's a sound frequency known as Gurmukhi. So he says for the hypothalamus, there is japa. And for the frontal lobe, there is meditation. Kundalini yoga expresses itself in that way. If you think that you are you, aha, not true. It is the set of the frontal lobe which controls your personality, and you will just do the pattern again and again and again because that pattern is set, he says. You cannot change the pattern by counseling and by this and that. You can break the pattern by rewriting it, he says. So, what does this mean? The frontal lobe is where your personality patterns live. Your I always do this. Your this is just how I am. The hypothalamus runs your automatic survival responses. So, hunger, sleep, stress, hormones, basic fight and flight. Now, japa, which is repetitive mantra, it works on the hypothalamus. So it calms and resets the automatic stress wiring. And then meditation works on the frontal lobe. It rewrites the personality patterns you keep repeating. So, in other words, you don't change patterns by willpower alone or even affirmations. You change them by rewiring the brain and the nervous system. And that's Kundalini Yoga therapy. And right now, this is so, 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 so important because we're entering into this era where Jogi Bhajan talked about how we wouldn't even see the spike of cold depression that hit its highest until like 20 from 2028 and to at least a few years post 2028. Because what a lot of human beings are struggling with right now is what is known as cold depression. And Kundalini Yoga, we know that basically this is an overwhelm of the nervous system. You have so much outer stimulation that we consume more information in one day today than our ancestors consumed in their entire lifetime just 80 years ago. Our brains are processing, even if it's good information or education, it's like a computer that never gets turned off. So it's constantly processing all this information. That affects the nervous system. That affects your state of emotional consciousness. And cold depression means I have way too much outer stimulation, whether it's the consumption of information, all the text messages, the emails, all these different things that modern day life bring forth, then that in itself means that I have no inner prana. There's no reserves of energy or vitality inside of me. So then that turns into cold depression. So it's an overwhelm of the nervous system from outer stimulation that then impacts our inner world. And cold depression is when your inner prana or your inner fire goes out. So you're functioning, but you feel empty, numb, you feel disconnected. You're always tired, which is why you're drinking a lot of coffee or maybe even alcohol. And because you feel numb and hopeless, like you're walking through a fog, you're doing a lot of things that raise your adrenaline, like for example, having affairs, jumping off of planes. I mean, if this is what you love to do, this is what you love to do. But a lot of people start doing this because they want to feel alive again, because they're so numb, because life feels like too much. Even when nothing dramatic is happening. And when nothing dramatic is happening, they create drama because the brain is not used to peace and neutrality. They're used to chaos and the adrenaline and the cortisol that gets released through that. And this is what happens when pressure plus unresolved trauma plus an overwhelmment of outer stimulation impact the nervous system. So instead of like bring you inward and help you balance your hormones and all these different things that the nervous system is supposed to do, from the outside, you might look strong, you might look like you're high functioning, you might look like you're independent, but inside your system is completely shutting down. That's exactly what happened to me when I was a real estate broker before Kundalini Yoga therapy found me. I mean, on the outside, I just looked like I was put together, married to her high school sweetheart, top of her game on her business, real estate broker, the houses, the cars, the kids, high functioning, but very independent, right? Strong for sure, involved in all the leadership. Little did they know that inside I was dying. Not only was I dying, my literally I went through burnout. I had a complete nervous system breakdown until I realized that the trauma and that me not having specific practices to regulate my nervous system were the root cause of what I was experiencing. And that's exactly the magic or the beauty or the science of Yoga therapy, because Kundalini Yoga therapy is never like about performing all these flashy postures. In fact, you have to remember your body follows what the mind teaches it. So if your body cannot sit in a certain position or do a certain thing, it's because the mind is blocked. If you ultimately yoga is union. And when you meditate, you come into union with yourself so that instead of being a slave of the mind, you are basically the one that commands the brain, which is very important. So Kundalini Yoga is more than anything a fundamental meditation practice, and it is about strengthening the nervous system so that it can actually hold more light. Light is information instead of more trauma, right? Light is truth. Light is the spiritual experience. That's why we say prana. You don't have to push yourself through life. You need prana. You need vitality. And that's what the Kundalini Yoga therapy meditations help us do. They also help you work with that very important nerve of your nervous system, which is the vagus nerve. We talked about that previously. And that through the breathing that we do, through the meditations that we use, there's specific ones, through the mantra that we're chanting, through the way we position our hands, which is actually called mudra, that changes the tonality of the vagus nerve for faster and more and a better ability to actually process and regulate those emotions instead of you thinking you are the emotions. There's also something in Kundalini Yoga therapy that we call the tattvas. And the tattvas are the elements, all of the elements that you're comprised of. So basically, when you practice Kundalini Yoga, what you're doing is you're balancing these elements so that you're not stuck in too much air being anxiety, or maybe too much fire. Fire is the rage, right? Or maybe you're too much in the earth element. which is depression and heaviness. So the tattvas are these elements that need to be purified and rebalanced, and that's all done through Kundalini Yoga meditation. The other thing about this is that there's an awakening and stabilizing of the Kundalini energy in your spine. It's located in the fourth vertebrae of your spine. And this is like the electrical column where the electricity moves through. And when we go through trauma, this energy gets stuck at the root chakra. So we awaken it safely through meditation, Kundalini Yoga meditation, so that electricity can re-stabilize and reawaken the nervous system's capacity to do its job instead of getting stuck in the fight and flight. And mantra also, my gosh, I'm going to share with you next is really, really powerful mantra specifically for the nervous system. But mantra is what helps rewrite those patterns from the frontal lobe, from the hippocampus, from the amygdala, and the nervous system, the three parts of the nervous system that I just shared with you that Yogi Bhajan was talking about. So when we do something simple as chanting mantra, we're not just like being spiritual and cute. This is a science of sound. So one of the mantras that I love to share with my community is one that I also practice every single day through the meditation that is known as the Kirtan Kriya. But this mantra, for example, Satanama, such a simple sound frequency, right? This mantra, the science behind it is beyond incredible because it's been studied by universities like UCLA. Because this mantra is used in the Kirtan Kriya meditation, which actually reverses Alzheimer's and dementia. It doesn't just restore like your brain from memory loss, it reverses. It completely, I mean, you could practice this meditation and you could be 100 years old. You practice this meditation for over 40 days, and all of a sudden your brain looks like it's a young 25-year-old brain. Why? Well, these sounds are activating the 84 meridian points on the top palate of your tongue, of your mouth, through the tongue. That's why there's nothing more powerful than vocal toning to heal yourself because the tongue hits these specific meridian points on the upper palate and it sends signals into the brain. You know, those areas that were dormant because of the trauma or that stopped functioning, like the hippocampus and the amygdala that shrunk. Well, guess what? You chanting sa, ta, na, ma, tongue activating that upper palate, all of a sudden, these areas of the brain start lighting up again. And then guess what? The rhythm of the mantra organizes and reorganizes the brain waves, creates new neurons. There's like this video that I shared on my Instagram recently of the actual like footage of what happens when you meditate and these neurons start to be reborn and recreated and then they start talking to each other. Like for example, addiction. Addiction is simply your pineal and pituitary gland no longer communicating with each other because there's trauma. When you start to chant, we actually use this mantra for the addiction meditation that we practice in Kundalini Yoga, the Sata Nama. These neurons literally in this scan, it looks like two little like I'm not gonna lie, it almost looks like two little like strings of energy, but at the end there's like a little head, so it almost looks like little sperms that are like traveling towards each other, except they're really, really long, these neurons, and then they start to touch and connect with each other. So now they're communicating. Now you don't need that coping mechanism, which is the addiction. And all because the tongue is hitting specific meridian points that are sending these signals into the brain. So the rhythm of the mantra reorganizes the neurons and the brain waves, and the meaning and the vibration of the sound begin to break these old loops, and they lay down new pathways of consciousness, of awareness, because your brain does not produce consciousness, it downloads it. So, and that's how we stop repeating the same patterns that our father, that our mother did, the same trauma responses, the same relationship choices again and again and again and again because we're not just managing symptoms with Kundalini Yoga therapy, we're rewriting the pattern at the level of the nervous system, at the level of the brain, at the level of your soul. Why? Because your nervous system is the electricity that lights up the soul. So you see how important this is. And Yogi Bhajan also says something very important about mantra that I want to share with you because it connects to what we're talking about. He said, we have two things in our body, the frontal lobe and the upper palate. We need to practice stimulation and control. These are two things in the body which are underdeveloped. So even when you were born, no one taught you meditation. No one taught you that your frontal lobe and your upper palate were underdeveloped. No one taught you that through chronic stress, which is our lifestyles in a modern day society like today, and the trauma that comes with it, like colonization, war, and whatever your ancestors went through, no one told us that we had to develop these parts of our brain. And then he says, and you can only develop them by imagination and by certain permutations and combinations of words with the tongue so you can get the result. So when you understand this, mantra stops feeling like just, oh, something I'm saying, or and becomes what it truly is, a neurological technology. And in Kundalini Yoga therapy, mantra is not used just to change your mood. It's used for the frontal lobe and the upper palate of your mouth. The two structures that Yogi Bhajan taught are underdeveloped unless we consciously exercise them. And why does this matter? Well, because the frontal lobe shapes your personality, your identity, your behavior, your intuition, your decision making. And the upper palate is mapped directly to the 84 meridian points connected to your brain's electrical pathways. So when the tongue hits those meridian points with very precise rhythm and sound, it's creating new neural patterns, literally rewriting the old programs your mother, your father, your grandmother, your great grandmother, your great grandfather have passed down. And that's why mantra is not affirmation. We're not using the English language here. It's neural rewiring through sound. And sa, ta, na, ma is actually considered to be the original sound of the universe. It's one of the most clinically studied mantras in Kundalini Yoga. Like I said, the University of UCLA has done extensive work on this. It's a four-part sound current that reorganizes the entire brain. And the mantra physiologically also, especially with these brain patterns that were created through trauma, completely changes them. It stimulates the vagus nerve through this rhythmic vocalization, right? It balances both hemispheres of your brain. It interrupts the repetitive stress loops. It's going to clear any samskaras, these impressions that are incarnated through with the soul that are inherited from past lifetimes and your ancestors that are stuck basically in your subconscious memory. It's also going to return the mind to neutrality. That's what a yogi is. Not one who can bend their bodies in crazy ways. It's one that can be present, one that could be in the moment, one that can simply be in acceptance and surrender. And it returns the mind to that neutrality because the frontal lobe becomes dominant again because it was either underdeveloped or impacted by trauma. And the science behind it is tremendous because each syllable of satanama, it hits a different region of that upper palate. And so it's activating specifically the cranial nerves, the vagal pathways to strengthen the vagal tone, and also the limbic structures and prefrontal cortex networks of the brain. And there's a lot of research that this mantra increases cognitive resilience, emotional regulation, memory consolidation for Alzheimer's and dementia, those that are suffering with those, and neuroplasticity. So you're not just chanting, you're sending electrical signals through the nervous system to completely reorganize the brain, especially from trauma. And Satanama really is the cycle of the entire universe. Sa means birth. Ta means life, Na means death and transformation, and Ma means rebirth. So when you're chanting it, you're moving your nervous system through this very same cycle. Release, reorganize, transform, and renew. And this is why it brings people out of cold depression, out of emotional numbness, and inherited shutdown patterns. Also, things like addiction. These are addiction. It's not why the addiction, it's why the pain, because addiction is just a coping mechanism for pain. And when you think about this from a generational healing perspective, your nervous system carries patterns from your parents, your grandparents, all the unresolved fear cycles of your lineage. And mantra is one of the chanting mantra, even listening to it is one of the few practices that rewires the subconscious where those inherited patterns actually live. Why? Because the subconscious mind responds to rhythm, repetition, sound, breath as pattern disruption. It doesn't respond to anything else. Rhythm, repetition, sound, and breath. So Satanama delivers all four with the pattern disruption. So it's never, oh, about positive thinking. If you tell yourself to just be a positive thinker with a nervous system that's hijacked by trauma, it's going to make you very upset and angry. This is more than positive thinking. It's ancestral nervous system repair through sound. And this is very important because ultimately, the real reason why at the root cause, one of the biggest reasons why our nervous systems are also dysregulated is not just because of the traumas we went through, but also even religion, war, and colonization. Why? Because religion has taught us to follow the teachings of Paul and to try to transcend fear instead of following the teachings of Christ, Jesus Christ, Joshua, and learn to master love. And this is what I want to get into next. I want to talk about the spirituality behind the nervous system and why it has to do with the way religion has controlled or tried to control us for so many generations that keep us in the same generational trauma loops. Now, now, we've talked about how the nervous system is rewired through sound and rhythm. We really need to talk about how perception is rewired because perception is connected to your nervous system. Mantra changes the electrical patterns of the mind, but A Course in Miracles, Jesus Christ's teachings changes the meaning behind those patterns, which is just as important. Your nervous system responds to meaning before it responds to anything else. Whatever your eyes are seeing, it doesn't matter. It's what meaning your nervous system gave to that experience. And in A Course in Miracles, which we teach inside of my community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary, and these are the teachings of Christ, Jesus Christ, Christ consciousness. We are given the spiritual formula for that exact shift. So before we get into it, if this is resonating, drop a heart below in the comments. Share this podcast episode with those that you love, those that are going to benefit from these teachings, and get ready to go down the rabbit hole with me. So, one of the things that A Course in Miracles or Jesus Christ says in A Course in Miracles is the essential resolution rests entirely on the mastery of love. So, what Christ is talking to us about is we need to educate our nervous system in the mastery of love instead of being vigilant for fear all the time. When we go through generational trauma patterns, because our brains become hijacked, we're constantly monitoring for the next shoe to drop, for something bad to happen. And through A Course in Miracles, Jesus Christ gives us one of the clearest, most direct teachings on nervous system healing, trauma healing, and spiritual awakening in one sentence. The essential resolution rests entirely on the mastery of love. So just let's pause right there. The essential resolution rests entirely on the mastery of love. Most people think the answer to everything is courage. Push harder. Just try to be brave. Overpower fear. Do the right thing in spite of how your body feels. But Jesus Christ in A Course in Miracles says that this is not healing. Courage is actually still fear-based, believe it or not, because it means that I feel afraid, but I'm going to force myself to act anyway. So it keeps fear alive in the nervous system. It says fear is real, powerful, and something that we have to learn to fight. And Jesus Christ corrects this by saying, trying to master fear just affirms its power. Because whatever you try to overpower, you secretly believe is actually stronger than you. So instead, Jesus in A Course in Miracles says, gives gives us actually the true spiritual neurological formula. What he says is don't master fear, learn to master love. And this is not poetic love, it's not emotional love, it's not even romantic love. It's divine perception. That's what he's talking about. The perception that sees the truth rather than the trauma. Remember, your emotions are not the problem. It's the perception of the trauma, the meaning you are giving to the trauma, which creates what is known as your ego, your programming. So, in A Course in Miracles, Christ says that you must master love the same way someone masters the violin. You got to practice love. Where so many of your ancestors were angry, did not forgive, can you practice love? And it sounds very infuriating because you're like, do you even know what I went through? Do you understand the abuse my dad did to me, my mom did to me? I totally understand it. But if you do not ask for higher power to assist you in healing and in releasing this, not only are you going to continue to drink the venom and poison yourself, because that's what cortisol and adrenaline do to us when we don't forgive, but it's 100% going to get passed down to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. In A Course in Miracles, we were talking about this in our Course in Miracles class. My sister Lizzie teaches it inside of our community, the Sovereign Sisterhood Sanctuary. It was talking about tending to the garden. And tending to the garden means watering it, right? Clearing the emotions. The garden represents your lineage, all the people in your life. When we tend to the garden, we practice love. We practice repetition of love, where we see the weed, where we see a plant that has perhaps that you have to learn to propagate, or you have to cut off and let it grow somewhere else. This means that instead of you denying and rejecting your lineage, you're getting to the root and tending the root so that it could flourish and feed 7 generations before and after you and benefit. Most of us don't do that. We don't continue to practice love. That's what A Course in Miracles. I've been a student since 2008. I've been devoted to it since 2008. I've been teaching it since 2017. Every day I read a section. Every Tuesday in our community, we gather together for 1 hour while Lizzie takes us through this. Why? Because that's me learning to master love, to break the pattern at the level of the nervous system. It requires devotion. It requires your willingness. It requires you being okay with awareness, self-awareness, and bringing these things to God. When you heal your nervous system, you reconnect back to God and you stop wondering where was God when you needed God through those traumatic experiences. Why? Because when love fills the mind, fear dissolves automatically. You call it out for what it is. False evidence appearing real. And most of our nervous systems are actually hijacked by fear because of the traumatic experiences that we have not rewired. So with this, there is no fight, there's no force, there's no battle. Fear cannot exist in a mind trained to perceive with love. And you gotta master it. You gotta train it. You gotta repeat it. That's where meditation and, of course, the miracle spiritual psychotherapy come into place. So the question then becomes, how do we master love according to Christ? Well, according to Christ and A Course in Miracles, we get a very specific set of instructions. Number one, you master love by choosing the right mind. The wrong mind equals fear, trauma, meanings, ego interpretation, the program. The right mind is the Holy Spirit perception, where every situation is an opportunity to say, Holy Spirit, I am willing to see this differently. That is mastery. And when you practice Kundalini Yoga therapy, you're bringing both the left and the right side of your brain into hemisync. So instead of always thinking, when is the other shoe to drop, you're able to be neutral. And when you feel these points of awareness where you feel disconnected from God, like anger or resentment, that instead of you believing that you are those emotions, you bring them to your altar in meditation and you ask the Holy Spirit, God, Christ, your spirit guides to help that you tell them, I'm willing to see this differently, and you let them finish the work. This is mastering. Most of us don't even have awareness. Why? Because our nervous system is hijacked through the trauma. So it's constantly in fight and flight. So we're just repeating a program of thinking without even being aware that it's a repetitive program. The second way you master love is by refusing to let fear define your meaning anymore. Trauma taught your nervous system to assign threat where there may not even be one anymore. We in Course in Miracles, we call this shadow figures. Basically, when you have not forgiven your father, your mother, the Judas that hurt you, even if you get rid of them, even if they transition and go to their next assignment, there will be another duplicate of that person that will show up in your life as the new partner, the new business partner, the new romantic partner, the person you saw at the car wash. That's a shadow figure. And God's not punishing you. This shadow figure is going to keep repeating in your life, in your lineage's life, until somebody assigns a new meaning to this Judas, to this figure, the shadow figure. Remember, love assigns a new meaning. That's why we have to dedicate ourselves to mastering love. It assigns a new meaning of safety, of truth, of presence. So you master love by refusing to let fear define meaning. You also master love by learning to release trauma from your body through Kundalini Yoga therapy. Why? Because fear tightens your body. Love softens it, and love is prana. Even if you have meditations where you're not sitting still, you're crying, you're angry, that's okay. You moved emotion. And that is where love starts to open you back up, where fear isolates you, love joins you with others. Fear will say, don't be part of a community. You got this. You can do this by yourself. This is the way it's going to be. Love says, my God, I'm not the only one going through this. There's other people that have not only gone through this, but have transcended it. And I give myself permission to heal. So the body then becomes the classroom where you practice the shift. Number four is you also master love through willingness, not through intention. We talked a lot about that last week in the podcast episode on the immune system. If you missed it, I'll link it below. But willingness is not readiness, it's not perfection. It's just, I'm willing, God, to see things differently. Not even I'm willing to heal. I'm willing to see things differently in my life, God. That willingness opens the door for miracles because it lets God intervene in your perceptions. But if our nervous systems are hijacked, we will not be willing. We won't even say that out loud because we don't believe it. We were like, oh, where was God when I needed God? Now I'm willing. Nah. The other way you master love is by practicing what is known as the atonement in A Course in Miracles. And what the atonement is the correction of your perceptions. So it's not punishment, it's not even apology, it's not even guilt. It's the healing of the mind so the body can finally rest. So you are willing for God to help in correcting your perceptions. And you do this because number six, you master love by remembering that fear is not real. Fear is not a spiritual force, it is an interpretation. False evidence appearing real. That's it. Love is the only truth. But when your nervous system is hijacked, fight and flight, adrenaline and cortisol, fear is what becomes real to you. Fear is what becomes the program that the ego operates. So when the body basically is braced because the nervous system gets stuck in fight and flight, all you hear is fear. But when the body softens because you're practicing Kundalini Yoga meditation and devotional work of A Course in Miracles, that's when you can start to hear God because instead of running through your body, adrenaline and cortisol, you have prana, vitality, and you're able to discern the light codes, information. And that's why A Course in Miracles is deeply physiological because the mastery of love literally means that you can finally relax your jaw, that you can soften your shoulders, that you can change your breath from below the belly button to above the belly button, that you can allow yourself to feel safe, abundant, and whole. It literally means that you stop the fighting. Your nervous system is literally the doorway to love, and you can't hear God from a contracted body. It's impossible. Now, the other reason why our nervous system contracts, especially, is because of what religion did to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Jesus taught a direct inner path to God, gnosis. And Jesus' message was the kingdom of God is within you. You and the Father are one. You will go do bigger things than I have ever done. Heal the sick, raise the dead, forgive, awaken. God is love, not punishment. That's what Jesus taught. His entire ministry was mystical, esoteric, experiential, based on inner transformation, focused on healing the mind, grounded in unity and forgiveness and oneness. So Jesus taught what is known as metanoia, a total shift in perception, not religion, not law, not hierarchy. He taught direct access to God, unconditional forgiveness, spiritual awakening, healing through love, and that there was never, ever a separation between God and you. And this is the exact same thing that A Course in Miracles teaches. Jesus Christ reteaches in A Course in Miracles and restores in all of us. When I started finally reading A Course in Miracles in 2008, that's when my relationship with Christ healed. Because A Course in Miracles is Jesus' teachings that are pure, that are unfiltered Christ consciousness. The same way that Christ actually taught in the Gospels. Jesus said, perfect love casts out fear in John 4:18. And this was written by John, not Paul. Most Christians and Catholics are actually following the teachings of Paul. Paul was this dude that never even met Christ in person. Jesus' ministry was around 27 to 30 CE, and the crucifixion happened around 30 CE. And Paul's conversion did not happen until around 33, 36 CE. And then Paul's letters were written 48 to 65 CE. So the timeline is Jesus walked this earth teaching. Then the resurrection happens. Then the disciples then teach his mystical message. Then Paul converts after he just received a dream. He got this dream. And then Paul says, I'm going to begin writing these letters because I got a message from Christ. And then Paul's letters become the earliest New Testament writings. Later, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, are written 30 to 70 years after Jesus lived. But the early church adopts Paul's letters as doctrine. And Paul enters the Bible before the Gospels were even written down. He was just a wealthy Jewish Roman dude. He was like an influencer. And he said one day, I got a dream, and what Jesus told you all was wrong. Actually, he was one of the ones that went after to unalive the 12 disciples. And Paul influenced Christianity even if he never met Jesus. He claimed he had this visionary encounter with the risen Christ, and he had private revelations, and he had spiritual authority that was given to him by God. And he used those claims to go after the disciples and try to unalive them and correct them. And he went around communities telling them what Jesus really meant. He literally shaped theology. He created early church structure, and he expanded Christianity beyond Judaism. And this is how we get to he thought that the church was a hierarchy. All of us, Gentiles, lower degrees. Only the church deserves to be rich and wealthy. God loves the church, but God doesn't love you enough. And then through that, Paul created rules for men and women, and all the women of the Bible got taken out. He started to create this idea of original sin. You're born with an original sin because of what you did to Christ. He started to create the idea of a mean God that would allow Christ to go through what he went through, that God needed the sacrifice of Jesus as blood as payment. He started to spread lies that salvation was just based on your faith. You didn't have to act like Christ and do the things he did. Just have faith and everything's going to be okay. All of this does not come from Jesus. It comes from Paul's interpretation of Jesus. And they did this because the Roman Empire was collapsing. The Roman Empire was rebranding itself as the Roman Catholic Church because for hundreds of thousands of years, they have used the church to basically control and to keep you under the state of consciousness of God is not within you and you are some kind of inherent sinner that deserves all the pain and wrath of an angry God that doesn't even exist. And all the churches are not teaching, I would say all, maybe there's a few that are, but most, like I would say 9 out of 10, 99% of them are not teaching the Christ teachings. They're teaching Paul's interpretation of Jesus. And to me, honest to God, he did not receive a revelation. He made this up so that then they could create the religion of Christianity, Roman Catholic Empire of Catholicism, so that then they could control. Because Jesus taught love as the final truth. And that's what we learn in A Course in Miracles. Love as the final truth. Jesus healed perception. That's what A Course in Miracles does. That's why I got closer to Christ and I understood the Bible when I started studying A Course in Miracles. Jesus said peace is the sign of alignment. Jesus said the Father is within. Same thing the Course says. Jesus said that fear is an illusion. Same thing that Jesus says in A Course in Miracles. Jesus taught willingness, surrender, and forgiveness. Exactly what we learn in A Course in Miracles. Jesus was a nervous system healer. He calmed the storms externally and internally. Very big difference from Paul because Paul, all he worried about or focused on, not worried, focused on sin, punishment, suffering, obedience, hierarchy, sacrifice, submission, and fear of God. The complete opposite of what Jesus taught. Love, healing, perception, forgiveness, peace, connection to God, inner transformation. So Paul used fear to motivate behavior, while Jesus used love to awaken truth. Paul teaches hierarchy. The church is better than you. That's why we're rich and you're not. Jesus taught equality. He hung out with the thieves at the bars, with the prostitutes, call it what you will, which, by the way, Mary Magdalene was never a prostitute. The church had to retract that. I think it was in the year 1969 when it actually happened, but she was never a prostitute. This was yet another narrative that got thrown into religion so that women can be looked at as less than. That's what Paul's plan was the whole time. And that's why in A Course in Miracles, even though Paul teaches fear of God, we learn through Christ that intimacy with God is why you're even incarnated. Paul teaches worthiness through behavior. Jesus taught worthiness through being. You're already worthy because of who you are, the highest daughter of God. You're not God, but you are an expression of God. God wanting to experience herself through you. And this is very important when it comes to generational healing because in A Course in Miracles, Christ says that the essential resolution rests entirely on the mastery of love, like we've talked about here before, which means you break generational trauma not by fighting your fears, but by cultivating love as a skill. And that's done through your nervous system and through your brain and through devotion to spiritual practices like A Course in Miracles. It's the kind of love that brings safety, the love that rewrites your perceptions, the meaning that you're giving to the trauma, the love that calms the nervous system and re-educates it to feel safe again, the love that ends father wounds, mother wounds, the love that restores your connection to God, the love that lets the Holy Spirit reinterpret everything for you. Love becomes not a feeling, it's a practice, it's a pathway, it's a rewiring, it's a return, it's a remembrance. And this is the foundation of generational healing. Fear is the inheritance, love is the correction. So, from Christ consciousness perspective, fear is actually a misperception that has been wired into the nervous system. Trauma teaches us the wrong meaning. Our nervous system reacts to meaning, not to an actual event. Love is the correction. Safety is the doorway to God through your nervous system. Willingness opens healing, and atonement is the shift in perception from fear to love. So notice how Jesus Christ in A Course in Miracles never says, master the fear, which is what they tell you to do. It says, master love. Christ says, master love, because the body cannot hold both states at once. Try it. Try to be in complete love and fear at the same time. It's impossible. The only one that I've seen get closest to this is probably my dog Suko. Because my dog Suko, I have seen him be angry and his tail wagging at the same time. But yet I've never been able to see a human being be angry and in love at the same time. So he must be some kind of rare specimen. So overall, what does the mastery of love actually look like in your body? Well, that changes the nervous system. Your body stops bracing for the other shoe to drop. Your breath becomes more rhythmic and natural. And the muscles start to release the past, the psoas, where we hold all the generational trauma, especially. We're letting the nervous system feel safe enough to actually hear the truth in the present moment. That's why when our nervous system are hijacked, we're always in the past or in the future. And we're letting God reinterpret what trauma taught you. Mastery of love is not emotional, it is physiological. Because when love enters perception, then the body follows. You have to change the perception, right? And this is important because we understand from A Course in Miracles that Christ tells us that fear is this mistaken interpretation and love becomes the correction, right? Same thing that neuroscience tells us. We know that the body reacts 25 seconds before the mind understands, right? We know that meaning creates the reaction. And we know that if we change the meaning, we can change the reaction. So Christ and A Course in Miracles and biology are saying the same thing. Your nervous system is obeying the meaning you assigned to the past. But here's the truth. When the body is braced, you hear fear. When the body softens through meditation, you hear God. And that's why forgiveness works. That's why mantra works. That's why using your breath in meditation works. That's why somatic healing works. That's why lineage healing works. Because all of this lowers the alarm system long enough for love to reinterpret the present moment. And this is very important for generational trauma because your ancestors interpreted life through survival. Your nervous system learned their meaning before you learned their language. So Christ in A Course in Miracles gives us the spiritual practice to correct this inherited perception. I'm safe now. I choose love instead of fear. God, reinterpret this for me. Let me see this through the eyes of love. This is atonement at the nervous system level. The father line actually reconnecting, and the father line then being able to teach consciously how to respond to pressure, right? How to respond to authority, how to respond to masculinity, responsibility, leadership. Because when the father line continuously teaches us fear, that's what the nervous system is going to learn. But when you master love, you're rewriting the entire lineage. The entire lineage. Biology says the body's going to follow your interpretation, period. And in Kundalini Yoga, we understand that the nerves carry divine truth when they are strengthened through meditation. A regulated nervous system is a spiritual practice because safety is what allows love to actually be heard. So I'm going to give you an example of what this shows up, or how this shows up in our lives, in real life. And I'm going to use an example of a woman that specifically was healing the father line nervous system patterns. So there was a lot of wounding with father, grandfather, great grandfather. And of course, these things were rooted in the nervous system. So this woman basically grew up with a father who was very unpredictable. He was silent when he was angry, very critical, and emotionally unreachable, even if he was physically present. So at that point, her nervous system learned silence equals danger, attention equals correction, pressure equals collapse, love equals performance. So as an adult, she then started to attract men who were very cold, panicked when she did receive authentic love and sabotaged those relationships. She overworked. to earn approval, and she never felt safe resting. She felt guilty. She also felt very disconnected from her intuition. So she joined our community at the sanctuary, and this is what she learned. She learned Kundalini Yoga meditation to regulate and rewire her nervous system. She learned specific mantras that she started to chant to clear this old wiring at the level of the nervous system at the brain. She was able to reassign meaning, shift the perceptions that she was giving to the experiences that she had been through. She was able to release cold depression, and her nervous system stopped feeling overwhelmed with all this outer stimulation. She got into the journaling that we do every single day. Her nervous system was re-educated. It learned to feel safe again. It learned that feeling safe was not a bad thing or a threat. And for the first time ever, she finally felt God inside of her instead of the fear, even for a second. And that second completely changed her entire life. And that's how it works. Everything comes back to this. Everything comes back to a regulated, rewired nervous system and brain that reconnects you to your true identity. Soul with the capital S, the highest daughter of God, your intuition to God. And you can't heal generational trauma just with your mind. You heal it through the body, mind, and spirit. You heal it through nervous system repair, brain rewiring, through Christ consciousness, perception, correction, through mastering love. That's the path from fear to love. This is the mastery of love. So as we close this episode, I'd like to invite you that to share this episode. If this episode spoke to you, if you felt yourself in these patterns, if your nervous system is tired of being in survival, the sanctuary is where we heal this in community through science, Kundalini Yoga therapy, A Course in Miracles, Christ consciousness, spiritual psychotherapy, lineage work, all of this through weekly trauma-informed classes, ancestral healing, fatherline and motherline restoration, nervous system rewiring, and brain rewiring. And A Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy with not just my support, but also the support of high priestesses, incredible first-time generational cycle breakers like you that have healed themselves and 7 generations before and after them. So if you're interested in joining our community, I'm going to post the link below in the description. Go check it out. All the details are there. And if any questions arise, feel free to drop your comments below here on this podcast episode or send me a private message. And of course, if you love this episode, please subscribe. It helps the channel so much. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Leave a comment, drop a heart if it resonated. Let me know what you agreed with, even what you disagreed with. And also share it with a sister who needs it. We are growing our movement and community of sovereign sisters like you. And by you sharing this episode, you're not only helping this channel, but you're assisting and helping a beautiful sister in your life. And make sure that if you are sharing it, if you're able to tag me because I'd love to connect and also share as well. Remember, your healing heals 7 generations before and after you. And it's not all love and light. It requires conviction, dedication, and it requires getting to the root cause, rewiring the nervous system and the brain so that you can remember that it is safe to be you again. Thank you for you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the hearts. And I will see you in the next episode. Sadna.